If you play fantasy football, this video will help you win your week 11 matchup. Let me explain. I've gathered over hundreds of fantasy football start-sit questions that I've gotten across all different social medias this week, and I'm going to tell you the 10 guys that I think you need to be starting. No doubt about it, it's going to answer a lot of your questions. So we got to start with Tyrone Tracy, who is like one of the 5 running backs that has come up so many different times, whether I've been doing like live streams on social media, DMs, wherever, in person even. Tyrone Tracy has come up this week. Somebody asked me about starting him in their flex spot. I want to talk about this as we head into week 11, but first we have to look back at what happened in week 10. A lot happened for the Giants between week 10 and week 11, firing the coach, a new quarterback starting. Obviously, those are big things. They're going to impact Tyrone Tracy. We'll get into that. But the other thing here is Tyrone Tracy had a season-high 14 carries, a season-high 71 rushing yards, a season-high in efficiency in that game last week. Now, obviously, he hasn't had a lot of opportunities to go out there and have a ton of carries because Cam Skattebo is the starter for a stretch this year, but Skattebo's now injured. He's done for the year, and Tyrone Tracy is quietly becoming a legit workhorse running back. Last week, he just played 66% of the snaps, had over 52% of the rush attempts, and by the way, this factors in Jackson Dart's rush attempts, so that's obviously going to be more if that Dart, when he does not play this week and potentially in future weeks, and 40% of the routes run. Now, this is pretty big, and what is also pretty big is the fact that Brian Daboll ended up getting fired this past week. Now, why does that matter? Brian Daboll had a lot of loyalty. He had a lot of respect for Devin Singletary, the backup running back on this team. They went back in the day from when Devin Singletary was a rookie in Buffalo together, and he's always liked him. He always goes out of his way in post-game press conferences to bring up Devin Singletary. Well, maybe not always, but he's doing it a lot more than you would normally bring up a backup or a third string running back. He likes the guy, and I'm sure that factored into Devin Singletary seeing a good amount of work, especially in week 9, where Singletary saw strangely a lot of work. All right, so that's one big domino. The other big domino is Jameis Winston is starting this week, and that's pretty big because Jameis Winston normally is like just the cheat code for fantasy. This matters for Tyrone Tracy because we saw him last year as a rookie who wasn't even a full-time player until like week 5 or 6, catch 38 balls out of the backfield. I bring that up because this week, the New York Giants are facing the Packers as 7-point home underdogs, as you can see right here on DraftKings. 7-point home underdogs. What does that mean? It means you're probably going to get, in his first game as a starter this year and with the Giants, Jameis Winston throwing 45 times in this game, and if that's the case, I think Tyrone Tracy is probably going to earn 4 to 6 plus targets. That's great for his upside in half PPR and PPR formats. So Tyrone Tracy right now for me in my rankings for this week, you can check them out at jointheblueprint.com. If you're not already a member, 10,000 people have access. You can as well. He's currently a top 24, borderline top 20 running back for me this week, which means he's an RB2 or a flex play and should be in almost every single one of your lineups who has it. Now this week I have a similar rank on the 4th round rookie running back out of USC, Woody Marks for the Houston Texans, because we just saw him last year or last week take on what might have been a true workload, like a workhorse role for the Houston Texans. Let me explain. So last week, Woody Marks comes out here and he plays 78% of the snaps, ranked top 7 amongst running backs, or 7th overall amongst running backs last week. He saw 70% of the backfield carries, 55% of the routes. This was a true workhorse usage. If he was to see this usage all year long, we would expect him to finish as like a top 12 running back. Now, obviously, we don't expect him to see this type of usage all year long. In this game specifically, the Houston Texans were trailing pretty big and had to play from behind. Ultimately, they came back in a crazy game and beat the Jaguars 36-29, but because they were playing from behind, you could see they got down pretty early in this one, 10-0, and then they were down multiple scores for most of the game until they scored 26 unanswered points in the 4th quarter. While you're playing from behind, it makes sense that you get your pass-catching running back, one of the best pass-catching running backs as a college prospect that we've seen him come into the NFL in quite some time, over 200 career college catches. But the interesting thing about this is that Woody Marks was on the field to start the game. He was on the field for these first drive right here, an interception by Davis Mills. It was only 3 plays, a pass to Nico Collins. He's on the field for all these. He's starting over Nick Chubb, and then he's getting the first carry and touches of the game in the first quarter. He gets a negative 3-yard run. He gets a 12-yard catch here. Then Nick Chubb comes in. He was starting, playing 3 drives ahead of Nick Chubb in this game. So yes, it became a blowout. It became a pass-happy script for Woody Marks in terms of the Texans trailing, but indications from the beginning was that Woody Marks was going to be the starting running back and potentially a workhorse for this game. That's what he ended up being. As you can see from Nathan Yonke, be sure to follow him on Twitter at PFF_Nate Yonke. He's showing Woody Marks snap percentages on offense by week, and that's the exact chart you want to see. A rookie who's going from playing barely any of the snaps in week 1, and he's just trending all the way up to now playing a season high this past week. And 2 out of the last 3 weeks, by the way, were some of his highest snap shares of the year, but a season high 78% of the snaps. You're basically getting at this point, these 2 running backs are all that's mostly involved. Nick Chubb and Woody Marks. Nick Chubb has showed all year long, outside of maybe like 2 total explosive runs. A couple of weeks ago, he had a long touchdown run in prime time. One run last week was a nice explosive play of 10 plus yards. Outside of that, he really hasn't done much all year long. And every single week, Woody Marks is making multiple big plays per game. It does look like Davis Mills is going to start this week. Now I'm recording this on Thursday, so maybe that changes if CJ Stroud is able to return. But if that's the case, if Davis Mills is going to start, you would probably expect the Houston Texans this week to maybe keep a game a little bit closer. They are 6-point favorites because they're facing probably the worst team in the NFL, the Tennessee Titans. So a couple of things are going to happen here. If this game stays closer because CJ Stroud isn't playing, well, then maybe you get a couple of more check down targets for Woody Marks from Davis Mills. But if the Texans indeed play with this 6-point lead or more for most of the game, that just helps Woody Marks even more because it probably sets yourself up for having a lot of carries in the second half against a defense in the Tennessee Titans that, as of right now, according to NFL Pro, allows the 6th most rushing yards per game, 141 per game. Honestly, I don't think they're the worst run defense. They're just not good on offense, and they're a bad enough defense that they fall behind in games and teams just run on them. That's going to help, again, Woody Marks. So I think you want to have him in your lineup this week. He's an RB2 for me. I mentioned that I had Tyron Tracy ranked as like my RB21 as of this recording. That will be updated based on practice reports the rest of the week and Sunday morning. Woody Marks is right around that same range. He's a top 24, borderline top 20 running back for me, which means in most leagues, especially competitive 10 and definitely 12-team leagues, he should be in your starting lineups. All right, let's go from a couple of running backs to a must-start wide receiver now. And I have to talk about Wan'Dale Robinson for many of reasons, because he's quietly had an awesome month of football the past month. Overall in the year, he's had a good year, even though he's played now, it's going to be this week with 3 different quarterbacks. Early on in the season in that overtime game, he had a big game of 28 fantasy points, right? But more recently, look at this. Over the past 5 weeks, he's had 20 fantasy points, top 10 finish, 15 fantasy points, top 24 finish. Then he only had 7.8, but he had a lot of targets. Then he had 14 and 12. He's now had at least 12 fantasy points in 4 of his last 5 games. During that stretch, the targets have been incredible. You're getting targets of 7, 12, only 4, 11, and 11. I mean, 3 out of his last 4 games, he's had at least 11 targets. Now, I get it. You're going to say, okay, there's a new quarterback coming in. That rapport he had with Russell Wilson and Jackson Dart might not be there. I completely agree in most situations, but again, this new quarterback is Jameis Winston. The Jameis Winston that last year with the New Orleans Saints, and basically any single where he's been in his career, just propels awesome fantasy environments because he throws interceptions, which means he plays from behind, which means he has to throw the ball a ton. Look at this from right here. Ryan Heath, he talked about this last year. Jameis Winston is feeding families, he said. Targets per game with Jameis Winston last year for the Cleveland Browns. Jerry Jeudy was averaging 10 targets per game. He was the wide receiver 3 in fantasy during that time. Elijah Moore was averaging 9.3. He was a top 5 wide receiver in fantasy. Cedric Tillman was averaging 9, and David Njoku was averaging 7.7. 3 different wide receivers for the Browns last year were averaging at least 9 targets per game. Even David Njoku, the tight end, was averaging nearly 8 per game. I get it. This was a different offense, a different team, a different defense on that Browns. I get all of that, but this just shows you what Jameis Winston does. He provides a lot of targets and fantasy production for wide receivers, tight ends, and running backs. I mean, let's just look at it. This is the per game stats according to Player Profiler last year for Jameis Winston. Once he took over, what does he do immediately? Oh, he throws for 334 yards. Sure, he's throwing interceptions. Oh, he throws for 395 yards. Oh, he throws for 497 yards, right? There's going to be some stinker games in here as well against last year, what was a much tougher defense in the Pittsburgh Steelers. But overall, especially considering the fact that he's a 7-point home underdog this week, which historically just breeds fantasy production for the home offense that has to play from behind, this is an amazing spot for all of the Giants players, including what looks like their number 1 receiver right now, Wan'Dale Robinson. So be sure to start Wan'Dale Robinson. He is currently a top 24 wide receiver for me this week, and depending on some other injuries at the position, he might even creep up into that top 20. Now, before we get into the next player in this video, I've got something great to share with you. I've teamed up with DraftKings Pick 6, the official daily fantasy sports partner of the NFL, where you can turn your game day reads into real payouts fast. All right, now here's how it works. All you do is pick more or less on 2 or more player stats, from breakout rookies to elite quarterbacks, and watch every snap get way more interesting. The better your calls, the better your payouts. It's basically that simple. There's no convoluted rules. Just pick 2 or more player stats, the more or less on them, and watch your players perform. And now here's the best part for you. Right now, new DraftKings customers that play $5 or more get $50 in Pick 6 credits. So trust your instincts and download the DraftKings Pick 6 app now using code SAL to get in on the action. In partnership with DraftKings Pick 6, the crown is yours. Next up, let's talk about RJ Harvey, because by all accounts right now, look, if you look at what he did last week on Thursday Night Football, one of the worst games I've ever laid my eyes on. 4 carries, 9 yards. He had a couple of catches. He only had like 3 fantasy points. Overall, it was nothing special last week for RJ Harvey, but that's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about the role that RJ Harvey had last week. We're not talking about the role that RJ Harvey's had to this point of the year, because it is now a completely different role. That is how quick things change in the NFL, because Broncos' J.K. Dobbins has an injury. It's a foot injury. If you were to watch this video, you would see that it's a pretty serious foot injury that, as of this recording right now, now. J.K. Dobbins has not been placed on IR, but just the fact that there's a real possibility by the time you're watching this, J.K. Dobbins will go on IR is all you need to know, that he's definitely not playing in week 11, which is what this video is for, which means RJ Harvey is going to go from maybe being this satellite gadget guy to seeing a much larger role in theory. Because when you look at what's left, let's just assume J.K. Dobbins is out. He hasn't been practicing. It seems like he's not going to be playing for a couple of weeks. What you have left is Tyler Bidet, who is an electric back, I would say, from his college career, but he's a smaller back. He has some limitations to his game. You have Jaleel McLaughlin, who has been like this Sean Payton darling, but again, lots of limitations to his game. I would assume that RJ Harvey takes over as the guy who's been playing all season long in this offense. It hasn't been Tyler Bidet. It hasn't been Jaleel McLaughlin. It's been RJ Harvey playing all season long next to J.K. Dobbins. I think that's enough to believe that Harvey's probably going to come out here and see at least a dozen touches, if not more, behind a good offensive line. Now, look, it's not going to be an easy matchup. He's facing the Kansas City Chiefs this week in a big divisional matchup where the Kansas City Chiefs are 5-4. If the Broncos are able to beat them, they extend their lead in the division to like 3 to 4 games over the Chiefs in terms of tiebreakers. So the Chiefs, though, have a top 5 tackling defense. They have, when it comes to run defense, middle of the pack so far. They're allowing 104 yards per game, 4.3 yards per carry. It's like a fine matchup. They're just a really good tackling team. They don't allow a lot of second chance opportunities. And in college and the NFL, RJ Harvey was known as a broken tackle machine. So it's kind of the best against the best. A great broken tackle guy against a great tackling defense. We'll see who wins out. But more importantly, the Broncos are 3.5-point home underdogs this week. And that's important for what we were just mentioning with Jameis Winston and the Giants. Home underdogs. Historically, they have just amazing fantasy production. All of the offense does historically on average, because you're playing from behind at home. It's a friendly environment. You have to throw from home. It's all these things that factor up to usually being comfortable and having potential for a shootout. So if you're going to play from behind, Bo Nix is going to have to throw more. There's even more chances for RJ Harvey to get check down opportunities. Maybe he has one of these games where he catches 5 balls. So Harvey, assuming J.K. Dobbins, when and if, and by the time you're watching this, he probably will officially be ruled out. For me this week, he's like a top 15 running back. He's somebody who has to be in all lineups, because the way that it's shaping out right now, I'm probably expecting at least 12 carries, at least 4 catches with upside. I'm also expecting a lot of upside for Jaylen Warren this week, because I mean, the matchup, we'll get into it. It's just as good as it gets. And this is a guy in Jaylen Warren who's just trending up perfectly right now. Last time we saw him 14 carries, 70 yards, 5 yards per carry, compared to just 2 carries for Caleb Johnson. And Kenneth Gainwell in this game saw a big fat 0 carries. He didn't get any carries in this game. It was all the Jaylen Warren show for the second straight week. Over the Steelers' last 2 games, Jaylen Warren has seen 81% of the backfield carries. So that's amazing. We're finally starting to get Jaylen Warren breaking out, and it's coming at the perfect time because he faces the Cincinnati Bengals. And if you know anything about the Cincinnati Bengals defense this year and last year, it's been historically bad. Specifically, their run defense this year, in just 9 games, by the way, they're allowing the most rushing yards per game, 166 per game. In just 9 games, they're allowing 12 rushing touchdowns this year. Teams love running on the Cincinnati Bengals. The Bengals can't tackle. They can't stop the run. They give up rushing touchdowns. They give up so many points to the running back position. That's perfect for Jaylen Warren, who, oh, by the way, has already faced the Bengals this year. And what happened? Oh, he only went out there and had 16 carries for 127 yards, averaging nearly 8 yards per carry. Oh, it doesn't stop there. He added in 4 catches for 31 yards. He had 20 total touches for over 150 total yards. He had the best game of his career the last time he faced the Bengals just a couple of weeks ago this year. Now, I'm not going to say that's just going to happen again. It's the best game of your career for a reason. It doesn't happen often, but I'm just saying it's a perfect matchup for him. Everything sets up nicely. And to make things even better, he's at home this time as a 5.5-point favorite. Last time he was on the road as an underdog. He's at home as a 5.5-point favorite. This is just the perfect setup. I mean, it's almost like too good to be true that it just seems like things won't go right, because that's how the fantasy gods are sometimes. But you're getting a workhorse running back and an offense that wants to use him, run the ball, he catches passes, and the best matchup you're going to find at home as a favorite. Make sure Jaylen Warren is in your lineups this week. I don't care who else you have on your team. Jonathan Taylor's on bye. Alvin Kamara's on bye. Unless you somehow finagled getting like Christian McCaffrey, Devon Achane, and another breakout running back on your team, you need to have Jaylen Warren in your lineup. You should also have Parker Washington in your lineup, because at this point, he's proved that he needs to be at worst a flex option and at best a wide receiver 2 to 3 for you. This past week, once again, he has a big game. 3 catches, 33 yards, and a touchdown. Okay, he also had a punt return touchdown in this game. He also led the team for the 3rd straight game with 7 targets. If you look at it now, according to Ryan Heath over on Twitter about Parker Washington, he led the team with a 30.4% target share last week, the highest by any Jaguar Jaguars wide receiver all season. He's now hit at least a 20% target share in 4 of his last 5 games. That is fantastic. He had 17 fantasy points now in back-to-back games. Parker Washington, he was a rookie in 2023. At the end of the year, due to injuries, he stood out. Last year, at times, due to injuries to Evan Ingram and Christian Kirk, he stood out. And this year now, due to injuries to basically everybody on this team, Brian Thomas, Travis Hunter, Diami Brown, let's keep listing them. Parker Washington is standing out, but this time he's actually earning a full-time role out of the slot, and I don't think that's changing. Over the last 2 games, he now has a 25% target share that leads the team on a per-game basis. Everything has been looking good for him, and here's the biggest thing. He was able to practice and seen practicing on Thursday with a hamstring. Now, you're going to have to track this. This video is going to come out on Friday morning before the final practice injury report comes out on Friday. He didn't practice on Wednesday with the hamstring. He was able to practice on Thursday. We'll see what Friday says. If he's able to practice in limited or full participation, I think that he's going to play, and that's great. If for some reason he doesn't play, well, then that just makes Jakobi Meyers an even better play this week. Meyers is already a flex option in deeper leagues this week, like a top 40 to 36 wide receiver. If Washington happened to be out, if he re-aggravated the hamstring, then you could put Meyers in. This week's game for Washington is also setting up. It's like the theme of this show. He is a 3-point home underdog. Once again, home underdogs, fantasy goodness. Trevor Lawrence probably going to throw 35 to 40 times. And if that's the case, if you're getting a 25% target share the last couple of weeks for Parker Washington, and he's going to throw maybe 40 times, maybe you get a 10 target game from Parker Washington. Even if that's a possibility, or a slight possibility, and it seems pretty good, just the fact that it's even in the cards that Parker Washington can see a dozen targets this week is crazy. I would have never thought that to start the season. He has to be in your lineups. Now, by the way, we're talking about a bunch of different players in this video, but if you want to see my number 1 must-start player at every single position for this week and every single week moving forward, I put that document together for you totally free. You can check it out with the link in the description below, or by typing in fantasyfootballstarts.com. This takes you to this page right here in this little drop down. You just enter your email, you click send me the starts, and I'll send those to you right in your email. Just give it a minute or 2. If you don't see it, again, it's completely free. If you don't see it, just check your spam or promotional folders. That will then update every single week and send to you as well. So be sure to check it out. The number 1 must start every position. I put a lot into that. I look at everything basically going on the week, and I give you a final notice on who you need to start at every single position. Now let's move to the tight end position. We've talked about a bunch of wide receivers, a bunch of running backs, and I want to talk about Theo Johnson. And if you haven't already caught the theme of the program today, the theme of the program is that if you're a New York Giant, because of Jameis Winston and a couple of other factors, you're probably going to be worth a start this week. Now, of course, there's some teams on bye, Tyler Warren, Juwan Johnson, who's been a nice tight end, so this is going to make guys like Theo Johnson even more important this week, and the fact that Jameis Winston is going to start is even better. So Theo Johnson's coming off of another nice game. 7 catches, 75 yards. He's been solid like all year long, especially recently with Jackson Dart. If we were to pull up Theo Johnson's game logs, let's just look at this over the last couple of weeks. 14.5 fantasy points, top 10 finish. 11.7 fantasy points, top 12. 15.6, 21.3, even 10.7. I mean, 5 out of his last 7 starts, he's been a top 14 fantasy option for you. And during that time, he's averaging over 10 to 11 fantasy points per game. And now this week, he gets to be that 7-point home underdog against the Green Bay Packers, who at times this year have really struggled against the tight end position. They do have solid linebackers, though. It kind of depends on the matchup and the specific breed of that tight end. Theo Johnson is a very athletic. He was one of the best combine testers of all time across any position, let alone the tight end position. So I think this is a positive matchup for him. You're going to get a game where he probably should be getting a lot of targets. I'm thinking minimum 6, upwards of like 9 to 10 targets, depending on how much Jameis Winston throws, which should be a lot as a 7-point underdog. Theo Johnson, as of right now, as of this recording, is my tight end 7 on the week. Only 6 other tight ends should be started ahead of him. And by the way, a couple of those names are like Trey McBride, or like Brock Bowers, George Kittle, right? He's on a pretty short list this week of starts. And so is another tight end than Jake Ferguson. He's another one of those names that is in my top 10 tight ends this week. Here's the thing. I mean, I get it. Before like two games before the bye, he was just on bye, then he had a 7-target game, then he had a goose egg game, right? So a lot of people are like, oh, since CeeDee Lamb came back, Jake Ferguson has been stinking. That's not necessarily the case, because if you look at the game log since CeeDee Lamb came back, and if we look at it right here, I mean, you're getting a 22-point fantasy day. Of course, that was on two touchdowns, but sure, a 22-point fantasy day. Then he had the goose egg, and then you're getting 5 catches for 50 yards on 7 targets. For most tight ends, getting 5 catches for 50 yards with touchdown upside, since he's so involved in the red zone, in an offense with Dak Prescott that's been highly efficient passing and been throwing the ball a lot in the red zone, like, Ferguson, he's been fine since CeeDee Lamb returned. He has 2 games with 7 targets. In one of those games, he scored 20 plus points. So I think people talking about his downfall are dramatically overrating that right now. You're getting Dak Prescott and the Cowboys in prime time this week as slight favorites going to Vegas to face the Raiders, a matchup against the Raiders secondary that has been very bad. And if you look at like the per game basis numbers, you'll see, oh, the Raiders have been really good against tight ends this year. Nonsense. If you haven't faced Trey McBride or Brock Bowers, and hint, Brock Bowers is on the Raiders, you're going to heavily skew if you've been good or not against the tight end position. The Raiders are not that great against tight ends. Speaking of the Raiders, let's talk about the other side of this game where I have to talk about Trey Tucker. I mean, the last time you saw Trey Tucker in that gross game on Thursday night against the Broncos, just 2 catches for 28 yards. That's not great, especially when Tyler Lockett was having 5 catches for 44 yards just out of nowhere. But here's the thing. Trey Tucker operated as the #1 receiver in this game in his first game since Jacoby Myers got traded to the Jacksonville Jaguars. Trey Tucker did not leave the field. He ran 100% of the routes. This led to a 13% target share. Sure, Tyler Lockett, the former teammate of Geno Smith during their time in Seattle, was able to see a 25% target share, but a lot of his targets were short, didn't have a lot of upside on them. Tyler Lockett himself is an older wide receiver, so if he's not catching 6 to 7 balls at this point in his career, he's not all that fantasy relevant just because he can't break tackles and he doesn't have the burst anymore. But Trey Tucker, as we've seen at times this year, has the burst. And now he's facing a bad Cowboys defense, a bad to, I mean, I would say a average to very bad, like somewhere in that range, Cowboys secondary. And Trey Tucker's going to be the #1 option running downfield as a home underdog, the theme of the show. I think Trey Tucker has a lot of upside for at least one big play in this game. I think he should be in your lineups this week, definitely over Tyler Lockett. When you look at the rest of his competition, it's just like Jack Bech, who hasn't been able to get on the field consistently. Like, sure, he's had some routes go increase in snaps depending on the week. Tyler Lockett, who I just said I really don't think has upside unless he's scoring touchdowns. And Dante Thornton, who has not been good this year, the 4th round rookie for them. So it's going to be obviously Brock Bowers and then Trey Tucker, especially downfield this week. Theme of the program, Giants players. We have to talk about Darius Slayton because of that, because this past week he literally just led his team in receiving yards, and now he's paired up with Jameis Winston, who, just a reminder, I'll pull up this tweet again, last year, well, not 1 Jerry Jeudy, not 2 Elijah Moore, but 3 with Cedric Tillman. Different wide receivers are averaging 9 targets per game. I wouldn't be shocked if Darius Slayton, the #1 downfield option on this team, comes out of this game with somewhere between 5, 6, 7 catches and flirts with 100 yards. I also wouldn't be shocked if Michael Wilson is a nice sneaky sleeper option for you in your deeper leagues if you're dealing with bye week issues. Maybe you had on your team this year Michael Pittman and Chris Olave, somewhere in there, and they're on bye this week, and now you have to have a bye week replacement. Well, Marvin Harrison Jr., he's going to miss at least 1 game and potential for additional weeks after he underwent surgery on his appendix. So he's out this week. That's all that matters for week 11 videos in terms of who you should start. And I think that matters right now for Michael Wilson, because who does this leave him left to deal with? It leaves him Greg Dortch, who's mostly a short slot wide receiver. And outside of that, nobody has left here. Semi Nfoku, he ended up getting injured. He rolled his ankle. He's on IR. Zay Jones, he's on IR. And that matters because the last time Marvin Harrison missed earlier this season with a concussion, well, Zay Jones went out there and had 5 catches for 79 yards. He would be the #1 receiver this week in theory, but he's out as well. So the only other guy that week besides Trey McBride, the tight end, at the wide receiver position to produce was Michael Wilson for 4 catches for 44 yards in that game where Marvin Harrison, after 2 catches for 32 yards, left with an injury. Literally no other wide receivers were productive. Greg Dortch had 3 catches for 9 yards. Nobody else was involved. So this week I feel really confident that Trey McBride's going to continue to probably see 10 plus targets per game. And then outside of that, Michael Wilson probably has to get 5, 6, 7 targets, and that's enough to be a flex option if you're in a bind. So these are the players that you must start this week in my opinion, and some sleeper options at the end for your flex spots if you're in a bad situation. If you like this, if you enjoy this content, make sure to hit the subscribe button. But before you go, if you want to see the running backs and the wide receivers you need to trade for before your trade deadline to ultimately win your fantasy league, you can check out these 2 videos right here. I think they're going to help you out a ton.